I never imagined I'd be the kind of woman people write Reddit posts about. But here I am, 36 years old, married just a year ago to a man I thought was my forever, and already watching everything fall apart. That night still plays over and over in my head. The night of our office Christmas drinks. It was supposed to be harmless fun. A few drinks, some music, laughter with coworkers before the holidays. I had no idea that one evening would become the start of something I'd spend the next year trying to justify, regret, and survive. I remember leaving the house that evening already tired. Work had been rough, endless deadlines, office politics, and that weird sense of loneliness even though I was surrounded by people every day. My husband, Mark, had been distant for months. We'd talk but not connect. It was like we were living parallel lives, polite, predictable, but cold. I told him I was going out with my team for drinks. He nodded, barely looking up from his laptop. "Have fun," he said. That tiny moment, that indifference, hurt more than I'd ever admit. At the bar, things started light. Music was loud, everyone was joking around, and the drinks flowed faster than I realized. Somewhere between my third glass of wine and a round of shots, I stopped worrying about anything. That's when Tom joined our table. He worked in the same department, older, funny, charming in that effortless way that feels dangerous when you're vulnerable. We'd always gotten along at work. He listened, really listened. When I talked about things, he didn't just nod, he saw me. That night, when I laughed at his stupid jokes, I didn't feel married. I just felt alive again. Looking back, I know how it sounds. But when your marriage has turned into silence, a bit of attention feels like oxygen. We left the group early, around 9. He offered to walk me to the train station because I was wearing heels and stumbling a little. It wasn't some premeditated plan. It just happened naturally. I remember the cold air, how his arm felt steady when I held onto it. We stopped near a small bar. There was live music playing and Tom said, "Come on, one drink before you go." That one drink turned into an hour. We laughed about office gossip, shared stupid stories, and for a few moments, I forgot about everything waiting for me at home. I don't remember holding hands, but maybe I did. I was drunk. That's my only defense. When I finally got home, Mark was asleep. I crawled into bed, smelling of gin and regret, and told myself it was just a fun night. Harmless. Except it wasn't harmless. The next evening, he showed me an Instagram message from an anonymous account. My heart stopped. The message said I'd been flirting with Tom all night and that we were seen holding hands at the train station. I felt sick. Who would do that? Who was watching us? Mark's face was unreadable when he asked me, "Is it true?" I wanted to deny everything, say it was all lies, but I couldn't. So I told him I didn't remember much after 8 p.m., which wasn't entirely untrue. He made me open my phone, check my location history, and there it was, the bar near the station. He kept looking at me like he didn't know who I was anymore. I said I was just talking to Tom because we had things in common, that we were just friends. He didn't believe me. I could see it in his eyes. He wanted to, but the doubt was stronger. And once doubt enters a marriage, it never really leaves. That night, we barely spoke. The silence between us was heavier than any argument. Over the next few days, I tried to move on. I told myself it was just a misunderstanding, that we'd be fine. But something inside me had cracked. And so had something inside him. A week later, I ran into Tom at work. We laughed awkwardly about the chaos that had followed that night. He told me Helen, one of our colleagues, had a crush on him and probably sent that message to stir trouble. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. By Monday, I came home and casually told Mark that Tom confirmed we hadn't held hands, that I was just drunk and clinging to him for balance. Mark didn't say much, just stared. That's when I realized it wasn't about what happened anymore. It was about what he believed. We had another Christmas party that week, the official company one. I went because I didn't want more rumors. I needed to show my face. I bought a new dress, something to make me feel confident again. Mark noticed but didn't comment. The distance between us was unbearable by then. At the party, I tried to keep my distance from Tom, but somehow we always ended up in the same group. It was innocent, or so I told myself, until we all decided to head to another bar. Only before going there, Tom asked if I wanted to stop by his place for a quick smoke. I hesitated, but he smiled, and I followed. That 30 minutes changed everything. Nothing happened, not in the way people think. But being in his space, sitting close, talking about everything and nothing, it felt intimate. Too intimate. And then I left. I told myself it was just a friendly moment. But guilt has a way of finding you even when you've convinced yourself you did nothing wrong. When I got home at 2 a.m., Mark was awake, pretending to sleep. I could feel his anger in the dark. The next morning, he confronted me. He already knew. He'd checked my phone location again. He had the address. He'd even found out it was Tom's house. The argument that followed was brutal. He accused me of cheating. I called him controlling. I said I was done being interrogated like a criminal. It wasn't my proudest moment, but I was exhausted. Mentally, emotionally. I didn't want to keep defending myself for something that, deep down, I wasn't even sure how to explain anymore. That's when I told him I couldn't do this anymore. That I wanted a divorce. I don't think I'd ever seen him so still, so broken. He didn't yell, didn't cry, just looked at me like he'd lost everything. And maybe he had. As I packed my bag, I whispered, "You don't trust me anymore, and I can't live like this." He didn't reply. When I left that house, I thought I was free. But freedom without peace feels a lot like punishment. And I had no idea that the real storm was still coming. When I walked out of that house, I thought I was making the right choice. It wasn't that I didn't love Mark. I did. But love had become this constant battle of guilt and suspicion. Every look felt like an accusation. Every question sounded like an interrogation. I couldn't breathe anymore. The day after I left, I stayed at my sister's. She didn't ask many questions, just held me while I cried. I told her Mark had become controlling and that I couldn't live under a microscope anymore. That was true, but it wasn't the whole truth. The part one didn't say out loud was that I didn't know if I was innocent either. I told myself nothing happened with Tom, that I didn't cheat, that it was all a misunderstanding. But sometimes the lines blur so much you start lying to yourself just to survive. Tom messaged me a few days later. "You okay?" he wrote. I stared at that message for an hour before replying. "No. But I will be." We started talking again about work, life, the fallout. He told me Helen had been stirring drama in the office, spreading rumors about us. According to him, she'd always had a thing for him and was jealous. I believed him. Maybe because I wanted to. He was the only one who didn't judge me, the only one who didn't look at me like I'd ruined everything. Within a week, our friendship turned into something else, something comforting and wrong at the same time. He understood what I was going through, or at least he pretended to. We'd talk late at night, laugh like we used to at work, and one evening, I found myself outside his apartment again. This time, it wasn't accidental. That night, we crossed a line. I could sit here and make excuses, say I was lonely, broken, drunk, but the truth is, I made a choice. A selfish, reckless choice that hurt the only man who ever truly loved me. I told myself I was already separated, that technically it wasn't cheating anymore. But my heart knew better. The guilt came fast, and it never really left. A few weeks later, I packed up the rest of my things from the house while Mark was gone. I couldn't face him again. He called a few times, but I ignored him. Then he stopped trying. That silence was worse than any argument. It meant he'd finally given up on me. I moved into a small flat closer to work, started seeing Tom openly. It wasn't perfect. He was freshly divorced, messy, and a bit too sure of himself, but he was there. He made me laugh. He made me forget how much of myself I'd lost. When Mark's name came up one evening, Tom said, "You need to stop feeling guilty." It was over long before I came along. I wanted to believe that. God, I wanted to. Months passed. Christmas came and went. I didn't reach out to Mark. I told myself it would hurt him less if I just disappeared. But every time I saw something that reminded me of him, a song, a cup he left at my sister's, that ache came back. And then Helen started again. She began spreading rumors at work about me and Tom, about how I'd used my marriage to stay employed, how I'd ruined 2 lives. I confronted her one afternoon, and she smiled, that smug kind of smile people wear when they think they've won. "You think he's different with you?" she said. "You're just his next mistake." I wanted to hit her. Instead, I handed in my resignation 2 weeks later. The company offered a settlement to keep things quiet. I took it. 6 months' salary to disappear. That's what my reputation was worth. Tom and I tried to make it work, but we were doomed from the start. He wasn't ready for commitment, and I wasn't ready to admit I'd chosen wrong. We argued constantly until one morning he simply said, "I can't do this anymore." And just like that, I was alone again. That's when I started thinking about the one thing I'd always wanted, a baby. Before everything fell apart, Mark and I had gone through IVF. We'd tried for years, endured heartbreak after heartbreak, for miscarriages that nearly destroyed us. I developed hormonal complications and had to pause treatment. We still had one frozen embryo left. Our last chance. When the settlement money came through, I kept staring at the email from the IVF clinic. They'd paused our file for 3 years, keeping the deposit and our consents valid. Mark hadn't withdrawn his approval. I knew what that meant. I could finish what we started. Even without him. I wish I could say I did it for the right reasons, but I didn't. I did it because I was desperate. Because I couldn't stand the idea of growing old with nothing to show for all the pain we'd endured. Because part of me still wanted to keep a piece of him, even if he didn't want me anymore. So I went through with it. The day of the transfer, I sat in the clinic alone. My hands were shaking, my stomach in knots. I almost backed out twice. But when they told me everything was ready, I signed the forms. My signature looked foreign, like it belonged to someone braver or stupider than me. 6 weeks later, I found out I was pregnant. I cried for hours. Not from guilt or fear, but from relief. For the first time in years, something felt right again. Except it wasn't right. Not really. I hadn't told Mark. I didn't know how. When my friend asked who the father was, I said it was his. Because technically it was. Just not in the way anyone expected. When Mark finally found out, through the clinic, not for me, he called me in a fury. I still remember his voice shaking on the phone. "You did this behind my back?" "I didn't mean to," I said, crying. "I thought you knew the forms were still active." He didn't believe me. Maybe he shouldn't have. He hired lawyers. There were investigations, paperwork, meetings. I hated every second of it. In the end, we both got settlements from the clinic, £80,000 each, for procedural negligence. The irony wasn't lost on me. We destroyed each other, and the world rewarded us with money. Through all that chaos, something unexpected happened. We started talking again. First through our lawyers, then directly. At first it was about logistics, the settlement, the pregnancy scans, but then it became personal. He asked if I was okay. He even came to one of my appointments. Seeing him in that waiting room nearly broke me. He looked tired, older, but his eyes softened when he saw the ultrasound. For a brief second, I saw the man I married. The one who used to hold me after every failed cycle, whispering that we'd try again. We talked for hours that day. About the past, the pain, everything. He said he didn't hate me. I think he meant it. When I told him I was planning to move north, closer to his hometown, he surprised me by saying, maybe we could both move. For the baby. That's how it started again. Not as lovers, not as enemies, just two broken people trying to do the right thing. We bought a small house together. 3 bedrooms, one for him, one for me, one for our son. I told myself it was just for convenience. But deep down, a tiny part of me hoped maybe we could fix what we'd broken. The first night in that new house was quiet. We didn't say much, but it felt peaceful. Like maybe this time, we'd get it right. But deep down, I knew peace never lasts. Not when it's built on guilt. Moving into that house with Mark felt surreal. It wasn't love that brought us back together. It was something heavier. Maybe guilt, maybe obligation, maybe just the fear of raising a child alone. But when he carried my boxes inside and smiled weakly, for the first time in a long time, I felt safe. I wish safety was enough to heal people. The early days were awkward. We avoided each other's eyes in the mornings, passed each other in hallways like polite strangers. But little by little, walls began to crack. We'd eat dinner together, talk about baby names, argue about curtains. It felt normal, almost peaceful. Then one night, after unpacking the baby's crib, he said quietly, "We could try therapy. Together." And I agreed. Our therapist was this calm, older man with kind eyes who made silence feel less terrifying. The first few sessions were unbearable. I cried through most of them. We unpacked everything: my loneliness, his distance, our miscarriages, the endless cycle of pain we never truly faced. For years, I blamed him for not loving me enough. But sitting there, I realized how much pain he carried too. He'd watched me break over and over, losing babies we'd prayed for. And when I withdrew into depression, he didn't know how to pull me back. So he stopped trying. And I stopped reaching out. That's how marriages die, quietly, one ignored tear at a time. After every session, we'd go home and talk for hours. Sometimes it was calm, sometimes messy, but it was honest. And for the first time in years, we started to heal. He told me he still loved me. I didn't know how to respond. Not because I didn't love him, but because I wasn't sure I deserved it anymore. I'd betrayed him in more ways than one. But he stayed. And I thought maybe, just maybe, this was our second chance. The baby was due on Christmas Eve, though he arrived 2 weeks early, December 11th. I'll never forget the moment I held our son for the first time. He was so tiny, his little hands gripping my finger like he already knew I needed saving. Mark stood beside me, tears in his eyes, whispering, "He's perfect." For a while, we were a family again. We laughed, took photos, talked about the future. The house finally felt like a home. But happiness built on broken glass never lasts. After the baby came, something inside me started to crack again. The sleepless nights, the hormonal chaos, the pressure to be okay, it all came crashing down. The diagnosis came quickly. Postpartum depression layered over my bipolar disorder. I tried to hide it at first, but the darkness was too heavy. Some mornings I couldn't even hold my son without crying. Mark noticed. He tried so hard to help. He'd wake up early, feed the baby, tell me to rest. But I could feel his frustration beneath the kindness. I was slipping again, and he was terrified I'd fall apart completely. We went back to therapy, but it didn't help this time. I felt like a ghost living in a house full of love I couldn't feel. One night, I told him, "I think I need to go stay with my mom for a bit, just until I get my head straight." He nodded. He didn't fight me. Maybe he was too tired to. I promised I'd be back in a week. I never went back. At my mom's house, everything felt quieter, but not peaceful. I'd scroll through photos of the baby, cry myself to sleep, and convince myself that Mark was better off without me. He texted at first, then called, but I couldn't face him. What was I supposed to say? That I loved him, but couldn't be his wife? That I adored our son, but didn't know how to be his mother? Eventually, the messages stopped. And that silence, that same old silence, became my punishment again. Months passed. My depression got worse. My therapist suggested inpatient treatment, but I refused. My mom begged me to go back home, but I couldn't. I told her, "He doesn't need me anymore." It was easier to believe that than admit how broken I'd become. Then one night, my phone buzzed with a message from an old coworker. She sent me a screenshot, a job posting in Sweden. It said Mark's company was offering a 1-year secondment abroad. And at the bottom of the listing, I saw his name. My chest tightened. I didn't know whether to cry or scream. He was leaving and taking our son with him. I sat there, staring at that screen, my mind spinning. Part of me wanted to call him, beg him not to go. But what right did I have? I was the one who left. The one who disappeared. The one who broke him again and again until he finally gave up. I still remember his last text before he blocked me. "I hope you find peace, Sam. That's all I ever wanted for you. Peace." I don't think he ever realized that he was the only peace I'd ever had. Sometimes, late at night, I watch old videos of our son, his first bath, his first laugh, the way he looked at Mark like he was the whole world. And I wonder if he'll ever know who I was before I lost myself. If one day, when he's older, he'll ask about his mother, and Mark will tell him the truth, or just the version that hurts less. I imagine them together in some small Swedish town, Mark making breakfast, our son giggling as he learns to walk. That should have been me there, not in this dark room hundreds of miles away, writing words that no one will ever read. Maybe this is what I deserve. Maybe I was never meant to have the kind of love that stays. But if I could tell Mark one last thing, it would be this. I'm sorry. Not just for the lies or the mistakes or the choices I made. I'm sorry for letting my pain turn into yours. For making you believe you weren't enough, when in truth, you were the only thing that ever was. And if by some miracle he ever reads this, I hope he knows that somewhere, no matter where he goes, there's a woman who still whispers his name when she can't sleep. A woman who will always love him in the quietest, most broken way possible. I just hope, when our son is old enough to ask where I am, he'll tell him something kind. Because I don't deserve kindness, but our boy deserves the truth, that his mother loved him more than life, but couldn't love herself enough to stay. And maybe one day, if life ever gives me a second chance, I'll walk up to that same train station where it all started and finally learn how to say goodbye.